Okay, France-Italy has concluded at the Women's Rugby World Cup to get Pool D underway. Pool C, both Pool C matches are tomorrow. There's one Pool D match tomorrow with South Africa and Brazil making their debut at the tournament. But France-Italy has finished 24-0 to France. It was 10-0 at half-time. There is a disallowed try right at the end of the first half. It took 28 minutes for the French to open the scoring. It was an arm wrestle. The Italian defence was really, really good in that first half. They absorbed a fair bit of pressure early on and repelled the French quite well. The Italians actually had more of the ball. The French had all the territory. It's a weird one. You would expect if you're winning the possession stakes to be winning the territory stakes, but that wasn't the case. Italy had a lot of the ball in their own half and around the midway part of the field. Only on a couple of occasions got into the French 22, whereas the French had a lot of their ball was in the Italian 22. However, they were not at their best, I think is a good way to describe the French performance. They were, I wouldn't say subdued, but they were frustrated. The Italian defence played really, really well. It took 28 minutes for Grise to get that opening try. A great bit of play for that opening try. Admittedly, the individual run by Grise finishes the move, but there's a lot of interplay involving forwards and backs before Grise gets the ball and scores. Bourgeois slotted the conversion from the touchline, and that was on 28 minutes. Now, the disallowed try on 39 minutes. It's a great cross-field kick. Two players compete for the ball. Neither can take it cleanly. It's not a knock-on. And then simultaneous grounding. Now, it took a long time to disallow that try. It is a bit of a comedy of errors. But I think it wasn't conclusive enough to give the try. I think there was enough uncertainty there. The amount of time the TMO was looking at replays, for example, and the amount of time they took to get to that decision says it wasn't clear and obvious that it was the French player or the Italian player first. It was simultaneous touchdown of the ball. And that one will be debated. But shortly afterwards, the Italians could have cleared their lines and gone in at half time 7-0 down. Bourgeois slots a penalty on 40 minutes. So the Italians unnecessarily overplaying. I think that's what the Italians were guilty of in that first half, is they had a lot of the ball, but they were overplaying in their half rather than trying to get down the other end and then apply pressure to the French defence. The physicality in this game was a very physical game. There were some big collisions. Neither side was willing to give an inch. Second half, the French, with the power game, they get, Calfoui and Escudero get their tries in the second half. And it makes the French look a little bit more comfortable than I think the scoreline suggests they were. They were in an arm wrestle here. The areas where the French won was the scrum and the line-out. The set play worked better for the French than the Italians. The Italian scrum was dominated in the first half. However, as the second half wore on, the Italian scrum matched up the French forward pack. So that's areas for improvement for the Italians. It was a grind for the French. They had a bit more power in the set plays, such as at line-out and scrum time. But even the French, their accuracy wasn't there. We saw this against England as well. They were very inaccurate, very sloppy. Lot of handling errors against England in that warm-up game. They only had the one warm-up game, where other nations had 2 or 3 warm-up games, and I think that could have had a part to play in the French performance. France-Italy is like Scotland-Wales. It's a very close rivalry in regards to the head-to-head. These are two nations that don't particularly like each other very much on a sporting standpoint, sporting rivals. The Italians, though, they need to pace themselves a little bit better with their attack. They need to improve their line-out. Scrummaging as well. The pack they finished with is probably the pack they will probably start their next game with, or they might rotate some line-up changes, because when they made substitutions to the forward pack, their scrum improved, which is interesting. So we could look at potentially their starting line-up. but their line-out time definitely needs improvement. And just some of their execution of the basic skills. Same with the French, even though they get the win, they don't get the bonus point, which could prove crucial. We just don't know how good South Africa are going to be. And so when both Italy and France play South Africa, that matchup is important. I think Italy will be frustrated they didn't get a losing bonus point or any points on the board. I think they'll be a little bit frustrated with that. I think they can be quite happy with their defensive efforts. I think the French will. I think the Italians can take more out of this game than the French can. If that makes sense. The French weren't at their best. They do get the win. It was an arm wrestle. They had to grind out a win. Their backline had opportunities, but the Italians defended them quite well. The Italians, had they been playing a little bit further up the field with possession, had some openings as well. And the French defence shut them down quite well. So defensively, both sides played particularly well. Their defensive systems for both teams worked well. It was some of the handling errors and some of the discipline as well, I think, let both sides down. But I think Italy have a few areas of key improvement. The French will probably want to improve just some of their basic skills and having a bit more patience and game management, because both sides were guilty of overplaying, I think, and just forgetting some of the basics, which are coach killers. And there were some silly penalties that both sides gave away. The breakdown was keenly contested by both sides. It was a physical encounter, but I think both sides gave a fair account of themselves in the physicality stakes. I think one of the strengths for the French is their scrum, and look for them to employ that in other games. The Italians, one of their good strengths is their defence, but they need to potentially defend a bit further up the field to aid their attack. I think territory is something that let the Italians down a little bit where they were playing. I think they overplayed when rather than just clear their lines. They should have just been more focused on clearing their lines and playing their way into the game rather than trying to throw the ball around early on, which I think it's opening game of the tournament. You want to put in a good performance. One thing I have noticed, and I will say this about all the games I've seen so far in comparison to the men's game, is sides are more willing to run it from deep than the men's game. There is less kicking in the women's game. And that's partly down to skill set and kicking ability, yes, but there is less kicking in the women's game. They're both teams are more willing to chance their hand from deep. Now, whether that's to do with new rule changes or law changes that have been brought in to try and encourage more ball in play and to discourage pointless kick tennis, potentially. But it does seem to me that in the women's game there is more passing and running from deep rather than just one pass kick. You will see, obviously, clearance kicks to relieve pressure, but there seems to be, as I say, more teams willing to chance their arm and play their way out and be expansive and aggressive in possession, which it can be kind of refreshing to see, but at the same time can be a bit frustrating, especially with Italy, because they did have a lot of the ball, but they were playing in the wrong areas. But there we go. France win 24-0 over Italy, and it's the first game without any bonus points in it. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts in the comments section below. Pool C gets underway tomorrow, and of course the remaining fixture in Pool D, and that's the first round of group stages done on the opening weekend of the Women's World Cup. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts in the comments section below, and I'll have some more content for you all very, very soon.